Hello, students, and welcome. If you've been finding Act 1, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar a little tricky, you're in the right place. In the next few minutes, we're going to break down this absolutely crucial scene, making it simple, clear, and really easy to remember. The goal? To help you walk into your exam feeling totally prepared.
So, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start by setting the scene. Then, we'll walk through a summary of what actually happens. After that, we'll get into the really important stuff for your exams, analyzing the characters, digging into the major themes, and explaining some key quotes you just have to know. We'll wrap it all up with some practical tips to help you score high on your answers.
All right, first things first, let's set the scene. Before we dive into the action, we need to understand exactly where we are and why it's so important. Okay, so picture this. We're in a crowded public square in Rome. It's the Feast of Lupercal, which is this big, noisy festival all about fertility and purification. So on the surface, everything looks happy and celebratory. But here's the brilliant part. Shakespeare uses this public festival as a backdrop to show us the secret political tensions that are bubbling just beneath the surface. It's our first real glimpse of the conspiracy that's forming against Caesar.
So, how does all this tension actually unfold? Let's walk through the key events of this really important scene. It's a long one, so it helps to break it down into 5 key moments.
The scene kicks off with Caesar telling his friend Mark Antony to touch his wife Calpurnia during a special race, hoping it will cure her infertility. Right away we see a superstitious side to him. Then, out of nowhere, a soothsayer yells a warning from the crowd. After Caesar leaves, Cassius pulls Brutus aside, and this is where the real manipulation begins. While they're talking, we hear cheering in the background, and later, Casca tells them that Antony offered Caesar a crown 3 times, and Caesar refused it every time before fainting dramatically.
This line is one of the most famous in the whole play. The soothsayer shouts, "Beware the Ides of March," which is just March 15th. Now, how does the most powerful man in Rome react? He just dismisses him as a dreamer. That one word tells you everything you need to know about Caesar's mindset. He's proud, he's arrogant, and he thinks he's basically invincible.
Now, this conversation between Cassius and Brutus is a masterclass in manipulation. Just watch Cassius's strategy. First, he acts like a concerned friend, asking Brutus why he's been so quiet lately. Then he showers him with flattery, telling him how respected he is. Next, he starts tearing Caesar down, telling stories about how Caesar almost drowned and cried like a sick girl when he had a fever. He's making him sound weak and human, not like a god. And finally, he plays his trump card. He reminds Brutus that his ancestor drove the last king out of Rome. He's basically saying, it's in your blood, it's your duty to stop Caesar.
So what was all that shouting about? Well, the very blunt and sarcastic Casca fills us in. He says Mark Antony offered Caesar a small crown, a coronet, 3 separate times, and each time Caesar pushed it away. But Casca adds a very cynical detail. He says Caesar seemed less and less willing to refuse it each time, almost as if he secretly wanted the crown. This moment is so important because it puts Caesar's ambition front and center.
Okay, now that we know what happened, let's zoom in on the 3 main players here: Caesar, Brutus, and Cassius. For your exam, you really need to understand what makes each of them tick. Let's break it down. First, you have Caesar. Publicly, he's this powerful, godlike figure. But in private, he's superstitious and has physical weaknesses, like being deaf in one ear and having epilepsy. Then there's Brutus, who is the moral center of the play. He's totally conflicted. He says, I love him well, but he's terrified of what will happen to Rome if Caesar becomes king. And finally, you have Cassius. He is sharp, he's envious, and he is a brilliant manipulator who uses Brutus's honor against him.
This scene is absolutely packed with the big ideas that will drive the entire story. Let's pinpoint the most important themes you can discuss in your exams.
For your answers, you want to remember these 4 key ideas. First, ambition. Is Caesar's ambition a real threat? Second, manipulation. Just look at how Cassius uses his words to twist Brutus's thinking. Third, appearance versus reality. There's a huge gap between how people look and who they really are, and Caesar is the perfect example. And finally, power and politics. This scene shows us that politics isn't just about big ideas, it's also about personal jealousy and fear.
All right, let's talk quotes. There are 2 from this scene that are non-negotiable. If you can explain these well in an exam, you're going to pick up a lot of marks.
In this really powerful line, Cassius is basically telling Brutus to forget about destiny. He's saying, look, it's not fate that's making Caesar powerful and us his servants. It's our own fault. We're letting it happen.
The significance here is huge. Cassius is shifting the blame from fate to free will. He's trying to light a fire under Brutus,
telling them that they have the power to change their own destiny, but they have to act. He's making it Brutus's personal responsibility.
Later, Caesar says this to Antony about Cassius. It shows that Caesar is actually a very good judge of character. He sees that Cassius doesn't enjoy life, that he's always observing and thinking, and Caesar knows that men who are never satisfied are a threat to people in power.
And this is a perfect example of what we call dramatic irony. We, the audience, have just listened to Cassius plotting, so we know he is dangerous. Caesar's judgment is spot on, but his arrogance makes him dismiss the threat. He might see the danger, but he doesn't believe it can actually touch him.
Okay, final section. Let's bring all of this together and talk strategy. How do you take all this knowledge and turn it into a fantastic exam answer?
So what kinds of questions are you likely to face? They usually fall into two main camps: short, fact-based questions and longer, more analytical ones.
For the short answer questions, it's all about knowing the details. Be clear and direct. For example, if they ask about Caesar's weaknesses, you'd say, he has epilepsy, which Casca calls the falling sickness, and that he's deaf in his left ear. Simple as that.
Now, for the long answers, you have to go deeper. You need to build an argument. So, if the question is about Cassius's methods, you would explain his four-step process: showing concern, using flattery, belittling Caesar, and appealing to Brutus's ancestry. And always use this three-step structure. It works every time. Start with a clear introduction that answers the question directly. Then, have 2 or 3 body paragraphs where you make your points, and, this is crucial, back them up with evidence and quotes from the scene. Finally, a short conclusion to wrap it all up. It's a simple formula for a well-organized answer.
And one final pro tip: use sophisticated language. This is how you really impress an examiner. Instead of saying Brutus is confused, say he faces an internal conflict. Instead of saying Cassius is jealous, talk about his political ambition. And instead of saying he's just tricking Brutus, analyze his rhetorical skill. It shows a much deeper level of understanding. So to wrap everything up, what you really need to take away is that in this one single scene, Shakespeare masterfully sets up everything that's about to happen: the characters, the conflicts, and all the major themes. It all starts right here. This scene lays the foundation of the conspiracy against Caesar.